Some of you may be aware that there was an inquest held last week into the death of Peter Lynch. I say some of you because there wasn't a great deal of media interest in this inquest. If you're not aware of who Peter Lynch is or was, Peter Lynch was the 61-year-old grandfather who attended a protest in the wake of the Southport massacre in 2024 and found himself banged up for an extortionate amount of time and sadly hung himself in prison a few weeks later. In fact, just 76 days from that protest to his death. His trial, his incarceration, 76 days. Now, I know whenever we talk about Peter Lynch or we post things about Peter Lynch, we tend to get the occasional comment, disparaging comment, that Mr. Lynch broke the law or Mr. Lynch deserved to be in prison or he shouldn't have done what he did. Let's be clear. Peter Lynch got a 2-year and 8-month prison sentence for holding a placard that wasn't offensive. It was about globalist NGOs, MPs, mass media involved in a conspiracy. And he shouted at some police officers. He didn't touch any police officers. He didn't touch anybody. He didn't pick up any missiles. He didn't throw anything at anybody. He didn't hurt anybody. He shouted at the police officers, child killers, because in his mind, because the protest was outside one of these asylum hotels, he thought that the police were defending potential rapists and killers, which we don't know. No one can prove whether that was the case or not, because we don't know who these people are that are being collected in the middle of the English Channel and brought into our country by these collaborator vessels. We don't know who they are, but what we do know is that some of them, not all of them, only a small minority, tiny percentage, go on to rape and murder. That is well documented. And not a week goes by without some despicable criminal act being reported by one of these people. So whether or not Mr. Lynch was correct or incorrect, he shouted at some police officers. And for that, he got a 2-year, 8-month prison sentence. Now, we don't believe that he should be in prison or he should have been sent to prison. But he was stitched up. He was stitched up because he had a solicitor, and a lot of people around that time who were involved in those protests who may have done a little bit less than Peter Lynch even, posted comments on social media or, did a little bit more than Peter Lynch and actually did pick up, an egg or a brick or whatever and hurled it in the direction of the police or the colonists or whoever it was who were the target of that particular outbreak of violence. And we think about other cases. He was advised to plead guilty, and he did. And he got 2 years, 8 months. Other people around that time decided not to go with their solicitor's suggestion to plead guilty and then get a lesser sentence. And they won. They did not get sent to prison, got found not guilty by a jury of their peers, and they are free and they never went to prison. Another individual who is quite well known around this moment in time, that summer, Councillor Ricky Wilson, I believe his name, Labour councillor who famously made a speech in front of quite a few left-wing protesters and decided to suggest that the people on the other side should have their throats slit, which is quite a disturbing thing to say in front of what could have turned out to be a mob.
They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all.
Councillor Wilson pleaded not guilty, and he didn't go to prison. He got found not guilty, and he was let off. Now, the difference with Councillor Wilson and Mr. Lynch is that Mr. Lynch didn't get his legal briefs funded by communist groups like Hope Not Hate or Searchlight magazine. No one paid for Mr. Lynch's solicitor. Mr. Lynch was found guilty. He was already banged up. He was placed on remand, I think, within a week of the protest. He was banged up and then he was sent to prison. And then it came out at the inquest. We got a little bit more detail into what went on. And the whole chain of events stems from this sense of injustice. So Peter Lynch went along with his solicitor's advice. He pleaded guilty. Then he got this whopping big sentence, 2 years and 8 months. Never been to prison before in his life, never been to court in his life, never been found guilty of any crime. He was a law-abiding citizen. And he found himself in prison, doing a long stretch for something he couldn't understand why. And repeatedly, he found himself to be stitched up. And he didn't trust authority. He didn't trust authority before that protest that day. He didn't trust authority. You can see on the placard that he had all these organisations listed, globalists, MPs, media. He didn't trust authority anyway. So he went along with his solicitor. He got sent down. He got banged up. He's doing this long stretch. And then he gets called in for a random drugs test. And these two officers that take him for this random drugs test decided to report Peter Lynch for comments that were made while the three of them were waiting for this test, this urine sample to be made. And Peter Lynch made a comment that all the immigrants coming in were rapists and paedophiles and shouldn't be allowed in the country. Now, these two officers took exception to these comments and deemed them to be racist. And they threatened Mr. Lynch with a process called adjudication, which is a disciplinary process in prison where you get hauled before the governor and you'll be punished accordingly. He couldn't quite work out what he'd said that was racist. His family solicitor at the inquest argued with the witnesses about whether these words were racist. these were directed at colonists, people coming into the country illegally of, various descriptions, some of them white European, Albanians or black Africans or people from the Arab world. But his words, he thought, were twisted, and the papers about this adjudication process were served the night before he chose to take his life. And there is a direct correlation between the adjudication process being triggered and his decision to end his life. Because why would he trust the outcome of this adjudication process, where he'd been fitted up pretty much all the way through this process by the solicitor, by the judge? He didn't see any way out. He thought that he was going to be punished again. And the note that he left his family, he wrote, "It's getting harder as I'm on my own." And he was referring to the fact that he didn't have a cellmate at that particular time. He was on his own in the cell. So it's getting harder as I'm on my own, defending myself with words that can be changed. I can't defend myself if people slightly misheard or change what I have said. I am basically defenseless. And that was the final note that he left to his family, and obviously he felt that he was just being stitched up all the way through, and sadly hung himself in his cell. Now, I mentioned that there wasn't a lot of media coverage about this. The BBC News, put an article on its website at about 11 o'clock, 2300 hours, on the night of the inquest decision outcome. As we all know, court proceedings take place in the daytime. So the BBC snuck this out late at night, so as few people as possible would see this article about Peter Lynch. And according to the reporter from the Sheffield Tribune, who wrote a very fair article about the whole of the inquest process, she said that after day one, the opening day of the inquest, and up to the last couple of days of the inquest, in between that period, she was the only reporter in court. Only reporter in court. Now, can you imagine this happening if this was, I don't know, say, a black guy that had his neck compressed by a police officer with his knee until he was dead? Can you imagine there being hardly any, zero national media interest in that case? Absolutely not. Of course not. This is all linked to the protests, the riots themselves. Those people that got banged up that summer, or a little bit later for those that pleaded not guilty and did end up going to prison, those people were dealt harshly and swiftly, and we're all aware of the language that was used by the regime at that time, which was Keir Starmer. We will bring the full force of the law down on these people. every time. I mean, whether it was Southport, Southampton, Belfast, Starmer was the same. These people will face the full force of the law. And it was swift and it was brutal. And it was designed to send a message to say that if you dare to take to the streets, to protest, to resist against the colonisation of your nation and the replacement of your people, we're going to come after you and we're going to bang you up and take you off the street for years. Even if you didn't even go to the protest, maybe you just posted something about it on social media, we're going to bang you up. We will not tolerate dissent. That is the message. And the message, with the lack of media coverage over Peter Lynch's inquest and, shall we say, other cases, other criminal cases that have been ongoing, that are ongoing or have gone through the courts in the last few years, horrible cases, there's a lack of media interest. There's a lack of engagement by politicians like Keir Starmer, like Sadiq Khan, like most of the Labour MPs. Because these people, they don't want martyrs. They don't want you to have any martyrs. Remember 2020? I mentioned it already, didn't I? The guy had his neck knelt on, Mr. Floyd. The scamdemic, the COVID stuff was completely forgotten about, wasn't it? It was put to one side because the whole of the establishment, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, fell to their knees, all the Labour MPs fell to their knees, the footballers fell to their knees, the whole world, the whole of the Western world went insane to make a martyr out of George Floyd. Because that was a martyr to the African American community, the people on the left, the various celebrities, etc. It suited the narrative. But when it comes to people like Peter Lynch, who was a political prisoner, we don't care what anyone says to the contrary, he was a political prisoner and he is a martyr. But these people, they don't want us to have martyrs. They don't want people on the right. They don't want British conservatives, American conservatives. They don't want any Western conservative voices to have martyrs. And especially not white British people to have martyrs. People that we can look to and say, look, this is a great injustice against our people. This is an injustice to the people of the West. The British people. So they don't talk about it. They don't write about it. They don't broadcast it. And with regards to politicians, they won't even give it the time of day. Remember Wayne Broadhurst, Keir Starmer, to this day, Sadiq Khan, to this day, never mention his name. Never mention his name, not once. Wayne Broadhurst, another martyr. And if we go back over time, we can go back 20, 25 years, there are others. There are other martyrs. Ross Parker, Gavin Hopley. You probably haven't heard these names. Look them up. Because there's plenty of people that have been butchered on British streets, unjustly, obviously. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to broadcast the fact that these people have been butchered. Like Lee Rigby. Fusilier Lee Rigby. And the people in the Manchester Arena. You know, lots of publicity. They couldn't hide the fact that dozens of people have been blown up, blown to bits. So instead they make it about something else. Don't look back in anger. Don't look back in anger. Do look back in anger. because we should be angry. Why is it okay for leftists to pull down statues in Bristol, daub graffiti over the statues of Churchill and statues across the land, up and down the land, with graffiti about BLM and George Floyd, and making a martyr out of this guy? That's okay. But for us, for the people on the right of the political spectrum, we can't have anyone. We're not allowed to look back in anger, but they can burn cities to the ground in America, and that's peaceful protest. But we throw some eggs and bricks or wheelie bins at the old bill, and we're thrown in prison for years, and we're the worst scum of the earth. And all the people, all the families, they visit them, and we don't know what goes on, but there's a nudge unit from the government, and these people are either politely asked, or they are blackmailed, or they are threatened into making various statements that they don't want the deaths of their relatives to be exploited, used by the evil far right. Every time this happens. Every time. Even Peter Lynch's family has said the same thing about, we don't want his death to be exploited, etc. Henry Novak's family. The lass who was stabbed in the head in what I think was Walsall with a screwdriver by the boat colonist. All the families come out and say the same thing. It's not a coincidence. It's something that they have been dragged into the system. I'm not concerned with that. In the greater scheme of history, if we survive the next century, if the peoples of Europe, including the English and the Welsh and the Scots, if we survive this century and we can write history books in the future, then these people, we won't be concerned with the fact that the government threatened their families. We'll be concerned with the fact that these were the people that paid the ultimate price of mass immigration. And that's what it's all about. So do look back in anger, and do not ever be ashamed of who you are, what you are, where you're from, your nation's history. Always appreciate the fact that we have something very precious here, and it's worth defending. We want to close our borders, not because we hate anyone outside, but because we love our nation and the people that made it. Thanks for listening.